Do you remember the feeling of a Sunday afternoon back in 1975? The faint scent of leaded gasoline in the air, and the only sound in the living room was the rhythmic clicking of a manual TV dial. Today's world is fast and flashy, but kids today will never understand the magic of the simple things we once had. Join me as we head back in time to relive 25 things that defined an unforgettable decade. Rotary phones. A lesson in patience. Let's start with a sound I bet you can still hear if you close your eyes. That were click, click, click as the dial spun back to its starting position. Remember? Back then, making a call wasn't just a task. It was a ritual. If your best friend had a lot of 9s or 0s in their number, your finger was in for a real workout. You'd stick your finger in the hole, pull it all the way to the metal stop, and let go. And then you waited. There were no saved contacts back then. You either had to memorize every number or flip through that massive, heavy phone book tucked under the kitchen counter. And speaking of the kitchen, that was the family command center. You were tethered to the wall by a long, tangled, curly cord. If you wanted any privacy, you'd stretch that cord as far as it would go into the hallway or hide in a closet, praying no one would trip over it. Kids today don't get the mystery of it. There was no caller ID. When the phone rang a real metal bell, the whole house held its breath. Who could it be? It could be grandma or maybe a neighbor. You only found out once you lifted that heavy receiver. There was a literal weight to those conversations. We didn't text, we talked. We listened, and when you were done, you hung up with a satisfying clack. It was a connection you could actually feel in your hand. Flash cubes. Moments in a flash. Think about the last time you took a photo. You probably just tapped a screen, right? But in the 70s, photography was a game of chance, and the star of the show was the flash cube. These little plastic cubes sat on top of your Kodak Instamatic like a tiny crown. Each cube had 4 sides, which meant you had exactly 4 chances to get a good shot. When you pressed the shutter, there was a pop and a blinding light. For a split second, you'd see black spots dancing in your eyes, and the room would smell like burnt plastic and ozone. That was the smell of a memory being captured. After each shot, the flash cube would automatically rotate with a mechanical click, bringing a fresh bulb to the front. But be careful, those cubes stayed hot. You had to wait before pulling it off, or you'd burn your fingers. And remember the green dot? If the dot was green, the bulb was good. If it was gone, you were out of luck. The magic and the torture was the waiting. No instant previews. You had to finish the roll, take it to the drugstore or a photomat booth in the parking lot, and wait a whole week. When you finally tore open that yellow envelope, even if half the shots were blurry or had a thumb in the corner, the ones that survived were treasures. They weren't in some cloud. They were right there in your hands, preserved forever by a tiny cube of light. Console TVs, the heart of the living room. Today, TVs are so thin you can hang them like a picture. But in the 70s, our TV was a literal piece of furniture. I'm talking about those massive wooden console TVs. It was a heavy beast made of mahogany or walnut that took 3 men to move. To us, it was the soul of the living room, usually topped with a lace doily and a bowl of glass grapes. Remember the warm-up phase? You pulled the power knob and had to wait for the vacuum tubes inside to glow before the picture appeared. It started as a tiny white dot in the center and slowly grew into your favorite show. And there was absolutely no remote control. If you wanted to switch from channel 4 to channel 7, you had to crawl off the shag carpet and turn that big plastic knob. Click, click, click. If the picture started to roll or get staticky, we didn't call a repairman. No, we used percussive maintenance. You'd just give the side of the wooden cabinet a firm smack with your palm. Somehow, it always worked. And if that failed, the youngest kid, usually you, was sent to stand by the TV to hold the rabbit ear antennas at a specific angle. Stay right there, don't move, it's clear. It took the whole family just to watch a movie. Late at night, the screen would shrink back to a white dot and vanish, leaving the house in silence. Hand crank windows, your first workout. If you told a kid today to roll down the window, they'd just look at you and push a button. But we know exactly why we use that word. Duba, because in the 70s, getting fresh air in a car took actual muscle. Every car door had a chrome handle with a little plastic knob. You grabbed it and started cranking in circles. On a hot July day in the back of a station wagon, you'd be cranking like you were spinning a prize wheel. It was a slow process. Crank, 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 and you could feel the weight of the glass sliding down into the door. And do you remember the triangular vent windows? Those were a stroke of genius. You just flipped the little latch and angled the glass to scoop the wind right into your face. That was the 70s version of air conditioning, and honestly, it felt cooler than any modern vent does today. The hardest part was driving. If you wanted to open the passenger window, you had to lean all the way across the bench seat, stretching until your ribs hit the steering wheel just to reach the crank. It was also a social experience. You'd ask your friend, "Hey, can you roll my window down just an inch?" There was a precision to it. You wanted it at the exact height so the breeze came in without ruining your hair. A simple mechanical connection that made every Sunday drive feel like an adventure. 8-track players, music, and the thump. Before streaming playlists, before CDs, and even before cassettes took over, we had the 8-track. These things were bulky, thick plastic bricks that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. You'd shove the tape into the player on the dashboard with a solid thump, and the music started instantly. But 8-tracks had a personality all their own, didn't they? The most iconic part wasn't the music, it was the track change. You'd be vibing to a great guitar solo, maybe Led Zeppelin or the Eagles, and suddenly, the music faded out. Click, clunk. The player switched tracks and the song faded back in. Sometimes it happened right in the middle of a lyric. It was annoying at first, but eventually, you just got used to humming through the silence. And let's talk about the matchbook trick. If your player was old, the tape wouldn't align right, and you'd hear 2 songs playing at once. Our high-tech solution? You'd fold up a matchbook and wedge it into the slot under the tape. That little bit of pressure tilted the tape just right, and the sound became crystal clear again. When an 8-track died, it was tragic. The machine would eat the tape, spitting out yards of brown magnetic ribbon like a plastic monster. You'd spend an hour trying to wind it back in with a pencil, but it was never the same. Still, those big cartridges had a strange charm. They gave you a sense of actually owning the music. Flipping through your 8-track carrying case was the highlight of any road trip. Loving the memories? Let us know by typing yes in the comments. We're just getting started. S&H Green Stamps, Mom's Happy Money. If you grew up in an American home in the 70s, I bet you still remember the taste of stamp glue. I'm talking about S&H Green Stamps. Back then, when Mom went to the grocery store or the gas station, instead of digital points on an app, she'd get a long strip of green stamps. And our most important job after a shopping trip? Sitting at the kitchen table, licking the back of every single stamp and sticking them neatly into the savings book. That slightly bitter, tangy taste of the glue. Remember that? That was the smell of patience. The whole family would save book after book, stacking them up until they were thick enough. The goal might be a new toaster, a nice set of silverware, or even a lamp for the living room. The peak of joy was Redemption Center Day. It was like a treasure cave. You'd walk in with a bag full of old stamp books and walk out with something brand new and shiny. Kids today only know how to swipe a card and get an Amazon delivery in 24 hours. They'll never understand the pride of holding something the whole family licked stamps for 6 months to earn. TV guide. Every weekend's Bible. Today we just hit the guide button on the remote to see thousands of channels. But in the 70s, if you wanted to know what movie was on Wednesday night, you had to have this weapon, the TV guide. Remember the excitement when this tiny pocket-sized magazine arrived in the mail, or Mom bought it at the supermarket checkout? It usually had a glossy cover of a rising star, but the real value was in those thin, gray pages inside. Every weekend, the family would sit together, passing the TV guide around to schedule the week ahead. We'd take a pen and circle the time for the Mary Tyler Moore Show, or MASH. That magazine was like a navigator for our social lives. If you missed the schedule in the TV guide and forgot to turn on the TV, haha, that was it. You'd have to wait until next year for a rerun to see that episode. No catch-up, no rewinding. And the best part was the crossword puzzle on the back page. I believe millions of fathers and grandfathers sat over their morning coffee, carefully filling in the names of character actors. Now, scrolling through hundreds of Netflix channels and finding nothing to watch. Sometimes I wish I could hold that little magazine again, just to know exactly what I'm looking forward to. Phone booths, 10 cents for a rescue. Imagine you're driving on a lonely road and your car suddenly breaks down. What would you do without a cell phone in your pocket? In the 70s, the answer was those glass and metal phone booths standing alone by the roadside. They were shelters, communication hubs, and sometimes where Clark Kent turned into Superman. Stepping into a phone booth was entering a very private space with a very specific smell. Old cigarette smoke, Windex, and sometimes a hint of damp mustiness. The first thing you looked for was the thick phone book, usually frayed and dangling by a steel cable. You'd flip through pages as thin as rice paper to find a mechanic's number or a friend's house. And the most important sound, the clink of a dime dropping into the slot. That was the sound of connection. No change? You had to call collect, a service where you begged the operator to connect you and the person on the other end had to pay for the call. I still remember my mom teaching me, if anything happens, just call me collect. I'll pay for it. Phone booths saw tearful goodbyes, secret dates, and emergency cries for help. Today, those booths are gone, replaced by charging stations or invisible signals. Kids will never know the feeling of standing in the rain, inside a small glass box holding your breath, waiting for that ring on the other end. Hitchhiking when trust was the compass. If you stood by the highway today and put your thumb up, people would look at you like you're from another planet or call the police immediately. But in the 70s, hitchhiking was part of the culture of freedom, a good, cheap, and fast way for the youth of that era to get around. It was a time when trust between people was still very visible. All you needed was a cardboard sign with the name of the city you wanted to reach, a backpack, and a friendly wave. But the person who stopped to pick you up might be a family on vacation in a station wagon, a lonely long-haul trucker, or a group of kids on their way to a music festival. I remember the conversations with strangers on those trips. You'd step into a total stranger's car, share a piece of bread, listen to an 8-track together, and tell each other your dreams. When you arrived, you'd get out, wave goodbye, and maybe never see them again, but their stories stayed with you forever. Of course, it wasn't always 100% safe, but that sense of adventure and the kindness of strangers define the spirit of the 70s. Kids today are taught to be wary of everyone. They move in Ubers with GPS tracking every meter. They have safety, but they've lost those chance encounters and the wild freedom that only someone who once held their thumb up can understand. Shag carpet and the rake. The art of grooming the floor. There's one aesthetic symbol that no American home in the 70s was without. Shag carpet. And I'm not talking about the short rugs of today. I'm talking about fibers inches long, soft, and usually in loud colors like burnt orange, avocado green, or harvest gold. Walking barefoot on that carpet in the morning felt amazing, like walking on a lush lawn right in your living room. But this carpet was also a literal black hole. Drop a Lego piece or a dime. Good luck. The carpet was keeping it for at least a few months until you moved. But what kids today would find weirdest was the tool that came with it. The carpet rake. Yes, you heard that right. We didn't just vacuum, we had to rake the carpet. After the family walked on it all day and flattened the fibers, Mom or Dad would take a rake, looking just like a leaf rake from the yard, to brush the fibers back up, creating perfect lines like a sports stadium. Seeing the carpet after it was raked, it perfectly even and smooth, was a strange kind of happiness for housewives back then. Today, shag carpet is a fashion disaster to young people, but to us it was the symbol of coziness, of long evenings lying on the floor watching TV and feeling the softness wrap around our childhood. I'm curious, what color was your living room carpet back then? Leave a comment below, I bet a lot of us had the same shades. Smoking everywhere, a blue haze of memories. If there's one thing that defined the smell of the 70s, it was cigarette smoke. Kids today would be horrified to know that in our time, smoke was everywhere like a permanent fog. Walk into a restaurant? They'd ask if you wanted smoking or non-smoking. But realistically, there was no difference because the smoke just drifted everywhere anyway. Remember those heavy amber glass ashtrays on every coffee table? Or the tiny metal ashtrays built right into the armrests of planes, buses, and even in hospitals? Even doctors might have a cigarette while examining you. In cars, the cigarette lighter was standard equipment, and flicking ash out the window on the highway was perfectly normal. The smell of tobacco clung to the curtains, the shag carpet, and our hair every time we came home from the movies. It was part of the social atmosphere. We grew up in that blue haze without a second thought. Now, walking into a completely smoke-free space, sometimes the faint scent of old tobacco passing by makes me suddenly miss those evenings in late-night diners, with laughter echoing through the gray smoke of a long-lost era. CB Radio, our first social network. Breaker 19, anyone got a copy? Remember that? Before Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook or Elon Musk bought Twitter, we had CB Radio, Citizens Band. This was humanity's first real social network. In the mid-70s, after the movie Smokey and the Bandit, these radios became the must-have item for every car and truck in America. The coolest part was picking a handle, a nickname. You didn't use your real name, you were Rubber Duck, Silver Fox, or Ladybug. You'd get in your car, pick up that heavy microphone, key the button, and start chatting with strangers within a few miles. We'd warn each other about police speed traps, the Smokies, ask about road conditions, or just chat to keep from being lonely on long drives. There was a whole language, a set of codes only beers understood. 10-4 meant, okay, what's your 20? Meant, where are you? The thrill of hearing a stranger's voice crackle through the static was indescribable. It was a community without borders where people helped each other through radio signals. Kids today just swipe a screen to find friends, but they'll never know the excitement of catching a clear signal from a stranger on the highway in the middle of the night. Pet rocks when imagination ruled. Try telling a Gen Z kid that in 1975, millions of Americans spent money to buy a rock as a pet. They'd think we were crazy. But the truth is, pet rocks were one of the craziest and most successful fads of the 70s. The genius Gary Dahl sold us an idea. The perfect pet. And it didn't need food, didn't need a bath, didn't mess on the carpet, and above all, it was perfectly obedient. Sit. Stay. And the rock always did exactly that. The special part wasn't the pebble itself, but the cardboard carrying case with air holes, as if the rock needed to breathe, and the hilarious care manual that came with it. That manual taught you how to train your rock, how to make it happy, and how to live in peace with other family members. We laughed our heads off at it and were willing to pay for a clever joke. Do you still have a pet rock hidden in your garage? Pop-top cans. A nostalgic danger. There's a specific sound to 70s summers, the pop hiss when you opened a cold soda or beer. But unlike today's stay-on tabs, back then we had pull tabs or pop-tops that came off completely. When you pulled that metal ring, the whole small metal tab detached from the can. And what did you do with it? Usually we'd toss it right onto the sand or the grass. That's why in the famous song Margaritaville, Jimmy Buffett sang about stepped on a pop-top. Those tiny metal pieces were sharp as razors and were the terror of bare feet on the beach. But pop-tops were also the material for legendary crafts. Remember the necklaces, belts, or even curtains made by daisy-chaining hundreds of these rings? We collected them like trophies. Kids today live in a safer world where tabs stay on, but they lost the dangerous but fun joy of collecting those shiny metal rings to create hippie art. Did you ever earn a battle scar from a pop-top, or were you one of the lucky ones who missed them? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear your summer memories. Encyclopedias. The whole world in your hands, physically. Before Google, Wikipedia, or ChatGPT, if you wanted to know about ancient Egyptian history or how a steam engine worked, you couldn't just slide your finger on a screen. You had to go to the bookshelf and lift down a heavy book. That was the encyclopedia, something every middle-class American family in the 70s dreamed of owning. Remember the smell of those new pages? A scent of knowledge and luxury. The books were hardbound with shiny gold leaf lettering on the spines lined up from A to Z. To us, these books weren't just info. They were a proud piece of living room furniture, proof of how much our parents valued education. Usually a salesman would come to the door in a sharp suit, open a leather briefcase, and pitch the treasury of human knowledge. And then our parents would pay monthly installments to own that set of Britannica or World Book. When homework time came, we'd sit on the floor flipping through thin pages, losing ourselves in bright illustrations and detailed maps. Kids today can find anything in seconds, but they'll never understand the thrill of holding the weight of real knowledge in their hands. The milkman, the clink at dawn. There was a very gentle, very distinct sound that used to wake us up every morning. The clink of glass bottles hitting each other. That was the sign that the milkman had arrived. In the 70s, convenience wasn't in delivery apps, it was in trust and familiarity. You'd put your empty bottles out on the porch or in a special insulated metal box. And like magic, when you woke up, there were fresh, cold bottles of milk with a layer of thick cream floating at the top. The milkman knew the kids' names, knew when the family was on vacation to stop delivery. There was a simple, pure human connection in that service. Our breakfast started by prying off the paper cap and pouring that white milk into our cereal bowls. Today, we buy milk in soulless plastic or paper cartons at the supermarket with no idea who packed them. The disappearance of the milkman took a piece of human trust with it. Kids today would think it's weird that a stranger could come to your door every morning and leave precious glass bottles without any locked doors or security cameras. It was a slice of a peaceful, trusting America that we still quietly miss. Metal slides, summer, skin ovens. Kids today play in playgrounds with soft rubber mats and high-tech plastic slides that never get too hot or cold. But our generation was different. We were forged by steel. Now see, I'm talking about those giant metal slides on the sand or dry grass of the 70s. On a burning July afternoon, that slide was actually a giant iron sitting at an angle. You climbed up those scorching iron steps, sat at the top, and whoosh! It felt like you were sliding across the surface of the sun. Remember that shredding sound, sot-sote, of your skin rubbing against the hot metal? Sometimes you had to put a piece of cardboard or your jacket under your butt to cut the heat. But even then, the speed of that metal slide was breathtaking. We hit the ground with red legs and a sense of victory. No one complained about safety. No parents ran over in a panic. We just laughed, dusted off our clothes, and climbed up again. Look, it was a wild kind of childhood that today's safe plastic playgrounds can never replicate. Do you still have a little scar from one of those rides on fire? No seatbelts. Freedom on bent seats. If you look at a car today, you see individual seats with a dozen airbags and multi-point safety harnesses. But think back to our family station wagon in the 70s. It was a true mobile living room with long, smooth vinyl bench seats. And seatbelts? They existed, but usually they were shoved deep into the seat cracks and no one bothered to pull them out. We went on 1,000-mile cross-country trips without being restrained once. We kids would lie across the back seat, or best of all, in the way back. That open space at the very rear of the car. We'd lie there, looking out the back window, counting cars or playing cards and reading comics. Every time Dad took a sharp turn, the whole pile of kids would slide from one side to the other on that slippery vinyl like a game of air hockey. If there was a sudden stop, the most advanced safety system was Mom's arm. It would automatically fly out by instinct to hold us back. Kids today are locked down in bulky car seats until they're practically in middle school. They have absolute safety, but they'll never know the total freedom of lying down to watch the stars through the window of a moving car, or the feeling of curling up to sleep soundly on the back seat while the hum of the V8 engine carries you home. Streetlights were the law, the boundary of freedom. In the 70s, our parents didn't have cell phones to check our location with GPS. They didn't call us home with a text. They had one rule, one unbreakable law that every kid back then knew by heart. Be home when the streetlights come on. We spent whole summer days biking through every alley, exploring the woods behind the house, or playing baseball in a vacant lot. The world was ours, and we were completely free. But when dusk fell, when the sky turned deep purple and those lampposts started to glow with an orange-yellow light and that distinct humming sound, that was it. The clock had struck. Remember that panicked feeling? You'd drop your baseball bat, jump on your Schwinn bike, and pedal like you were in the Tour de France just to get back before Mom stepped out onto the porch to call your name. If you got home after the lights were bright, you knew you were in trouble. Did anyone here ever get home late after the streetlights were on and face a memorable punishment? Share your war stories below. Let's see who else shared that struggle. TV dinners, aluminum trays, and family movies. Do you remember that crinkle sound when you peeled back the aluminum foil from the tin tray? That was the sound of modern convenience in the 70s. The TV dinner. Back then, being allowed by Mom to eat dinner right in the living room, in front of the TV, was a true privilege. Each aluminum tray was divided into separate compartments, like a checkerboard of flavors. The biggest one was usually Salisbury steak with thick brown gravy, next to peas and carrots, some mashed potatoes, and of course, the tiny middle compartment, the chocolate brownie or hot apple cobbler. Funny thing is that brownie was always lavi hot, and occasionally a few stray peas would find their way into it. But we didn't care. We sat at those metal folding tables, poking the meat with a fork, eyes glued to the Love Boat or Fantasy Island. Today, microwaves have replaced foil trays and fast food is everywhere. But that thrill of holding a hot tray that smelled like industrial gravy is still an essential piece of every Friday night in our memories. Disco balls and lights, the dance of memories. Whether you were a great dancer or just a kid watching on TV, you can't mention the 70s without talking about disco. And its ultimate symbol was the disco ball hanging from the ceiling. Close your eyes and remember that light. As the ball spun, thousands of tiny sparks danced around the room, over shiny polyester outfits and platform shoes. The music of the Bee Gees or Donna Summer played, and the whole world seemed to melt into those vibrant rhythms. Even high school dances felt magical thanks to a cheap disco ball hanging in the gym. That light hid the awkwardness of youth, turning ordinary moments into glittering dreams. Handwritten letters, patients sent in an envelope. Finally, in today's world of instant messages and emails, the art of writing a letter seems like a relic of the past. But do you remember the feeling of holding a pen and a blank sheet of paper? Writing a letter in the 70s was a journey of the soul. We spent hours carefully forming every letter, sharing what we'd done, our random heartbreaks, or our distant dreams. Then came the process of choosing an envelope, licking the stamp, and walking to the mailbox on the corner, and then the waiting began. Remember the thrill every time you saw the mailman pass your house? That peek through the mail slot to see an envelope with the familiar handwriting of a best friend far away or an old flame. The feeling of tearing open the envelope, the smell of the ink, and the warmth of the paper that had traveled miles to reach you, that was a physical experience that no messenger notification can ever replace. We still keep those letters in old shoe boxes under the bed, don't we? Because each letter is a piece of the writer's warmth. Kids today communicate this list with me. I hope these last few minutes helped you find a piece of your brilliant childhood again. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next set of memories.